Let's see. Should we get started with Christy's presentation and maybe we can get Brandon in here before
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I
this
think
heard?
we'll have it figured out before then.
All
So
right.
I hate to have everybody wait.
Well, welcome everyone. My name is Laura Schultz. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Sierra Club, and thanks for coming to our Gardening for Healthy Habitats. And this is with the Sierra Club and Root-Pike Win, Racine Food Waste Composting Program, and Wild Ones, the Root River Area Chapter. And we look forward to having you all here tonight. We're going to start with a presentation from Christy at Root-Pike Win. Then we're going to move on to a presentation from Linda and Sister Janet from Racine Food Waste Composting Program. And then we'll end with a presentation from Brandon, assuming we can get him in, from the Wild Ones Root River Area chapter. So I'm going to let Christy go ahead and take it away.
All right. Hello, everyone.
Actually, sorry, Christy, before I let you go, we were going to ask for everyone to please leave your questions until the end of the presentation. And if I can remind everyone who is not speaking, if you can go ahead and turn your mic off, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
And my slides are freezing a little bit at the moment, and then they just jumped ahead. So I'm hoping it'll adjust in a second. But to get started, my name is Christy Heiser, and I'm the program manager at the Root-Pike Watershed Initiative Network. If you aren't familiar with our organization, we're a local nonprofit. Our office is actually in Summers, but we serve the southeastern Wisconsin watersheds that make up the Root-Pike Basin. Oh, there we go. So our mission is to improve water quality and to restore and protect and sustain the tributaries of the Root-Pike Basin. So we do that through a few different methods. The first is large-scale restoration implementation. So of these 5 watersheds that I'll be talking about, 4 of them have watershed restoration plans, and they basically say which prairies, wetlands, and stream banks need to be restored if we want to see water quality improved. And then we have a variety of different education programs that I get to manage. I'm very lucky to. So we have the pollinator patch program, which is turf to prairie conversion, and I'll touch on that more later. Respect Our Waters is stormwater education. And then we support the Kenosha Regenerative Producers Group as well, since agriculture can have such a big impact on water quality. So this is the Root-Pike Basin. You can see it's made up of 5 different watersheds, and unfortunately, they are all classified as impaired. And that is coming from the Environmental Protection Agency. They have what's called their 303D impaired waters list. And basically it means there's too many of these different pollutants in the water. Is that what gives it its impaired status? So that's too much phosphorus, sediment, it could be chlorides. There's a variety of different things that could give these rivers their impairments. And how we got here. So if we were able to go back in time in Wisconsin, we would have had prairies and oak savannas, forests and wetlands and all these natural land types and ecosystems working for us here in southeastern Wisconsin. So when it would rain or the snow would melt, those landscapes would soak up the water right away for us. And then they were also providing wonderful habitat for all of our bees and butterflies and birds and everything else in between. But as development has kind of ramped up, especially down here in southeastern Wisconsin, we're really seeing that take off, unfortunately, in the last few years. It's going to change how the water is going to flow throughout the community. So when you're in really urban settings, if you think of downtown Milwaukee, Kenosha, Racine, we have a lot of impervious surface coverage. So that is just a fancy word for waterproof. And that means when it rains, that water isn't sinking back into the ground. It is running off across the landscape, and it's picking up anything dirty that's on the ground with it, bringing it to our local rivers and lakes. But if we have more of our natural ground cover and those beautiful ecosystems that I touched on back in place, you can see that the runoff numbers drop down and the water is being managed right where it lands. So we get less pollutants ending up in our water bodies. And here is a great picture, but sad example of how stormwater moves from just a storm sewer grate down through tubes. And this is an example of all the stormwater going directly into the Pike River, right by the mouth of the Pike River that's going into Lake Michigan. And when that stormwater moves into our rivers untreated, because with the exception of Milwaukee, our stormwater is not treated. So anything that's moving with the water is ended up in the rivers and lakes. We have more pollutants, but then we have less macroinvertebrates, so the little water bugs that are in the rivers. We have less fish, we have less frogs and turtles. So we are seeing our aquatic ecosystems go downhill as well. And then I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here about the rusty patch bumblebee, but as we've taken away those native plants, we've also seen our pollinator populations drop down. And the rusty patch bumblebee is a federally endangered bumblebee whose historic range has shrunk by about 87% over the last 20 years. And the picture on the left is the most up-to-date U.S. Fish and Wildlife Rusty Patch Bumblebee habitat map. So you can see here in Wisconsin, especially in southeastern Wisconsin, we really have a responsibility to get these native plants back into the landscape so that way it can support these wonderful little pollinators. So red are going to be high priority zones for the rusty patch bumblebee, and then yellow are lower priority zones. But over the years, we're really starting to see those red areas spread out and connect, which is really exciting. And I mentioned we do large scale restoration projects. So here are a few of the prairie restorations that we've been able to do at Root-Pike Wind. Smolensky Park is out in Mount Pleasant. Gitzloff Park and UW Parkside are both in Summers. And then Pritchard Park is out in Racine. So these are just areas where maybe there was a lot of flooding, there was a lot of invasive species. It was a farm field that wasn't being actively farmed anymore. And they were identified in the watershed restoration plans, and we were able to bring them back to the historic landscapes that they used to be. But since we are all working on a much smaller scale here, most likely, I'm going to touch into the pollinator patch program, which, as I mentioned, is turf to prairie conversion. So me as a water quality focused person, when I'm planting a garden, I like to look for areas like this where there is just standing water. So over the next few days, as the snow starts to melt, look at where the water is ponding on your property. And that's a great indicator that we could be getting some better deep-rooted native plants back into the landscape there. And that's because of their awesome root systems. So in the little red box on the left, you can see turfgrass has roots that go underground about 2 to 3 inches. So nothing too significant. So it's not soaking up a ton of water. But our beautiful prairie plants, those roots are going 6 to 15 feet under the ground when they're fully established. So with time, as those prairies kind of come back online, it's this beautiful sponge network underneath the ground. And if you can only transform 20 square feet of your property, you can soak up to 8 gallons of water per storm event. Versus if you leave that same 20 square feet, just your standard lawn, you're getting maybe 1 gallon of water soaked up per storm. So you can see if we all do a little bit, it's going to make a big difference for not just our aquatic ecosystems, but our terrestrial ecosystems too. And some examples of where we've done different pollinator patches and transformations. I'm going to focus on our office. So Root-Pike Wind's office is actually on UW Parkside property on Highway E for those of you that are in the Summers area. And it's the old chancellor's house. And we are lucky enough to be able to um, come and work there. So I get to go from a house to a house. I'm very spoiled. But here is the sign that's right there on Highway E, and you could see it was just grass beforehand, and now it is filled with flowers, and we've seen the rusty patch bumblebee pop up quite a few times at our office, which is always very exciting. And back in 2020, this is before I was on board at Root-Pike Wind, you can see we had just moved in and kind of what it looked like. It was standard grass and shrubs and great, but nothing, super exciting from my perspective. And then it was slowly transformed into a pollinator patch. So how it was done this way, they rototilled, got rid of the big shrubs, rototilled it, and then laid down that paper with some mulch on the top. And that's one way you can prepare your site without chemicals. I've also done it where you can lay down cardboard and you can do mulch on top of that, let it sit for at least 2 months, or the longer the better, but at least 2 months. And the way I'm going to try this year is actually laying down cardboard and then completely removing the cardboard and planting into the bare dirt. So trying all these different site prep methods since I hear different, positive and negatives about each one of them. And then we laid out the beautiful plants. And I'm pointing an arrow to our downspout because that's another really great spot that you can plant a garden on your property that helps water quality, but also all of the critters by building habitat. So now we actually have that downspout draining into a rain barrel, which is also great to get on your property because you can water your flowers that way. Or you can just disconnect it and run that tube more into the center of your pollinator garden, and then those root systems will just soak it right up. And here's what it looked like in 2024. So it explodes, takes about 3 years. So we say native plants sleep, creep, then leap. So it took a little bit to get fully filled in, but now we've had ducks nesting there and laying their eggs. We've seen rusty patch bumblebee, a lot of different birds. There's just a lot of fun stuff that comes in there when you put the native plants back. So with your native gardens, they also do really great things other than soaking up that stormwater. It's just less area to mow. So grass clippings are a really big source of phosphorus in our local water bodies. And when you have more phosphorus, you have more algae blooms. So just by less mowings, getting less grass clippings into our stormwater, we're helping our downstream communities. These native plants don't need fertilizers because that's just phosphorus and nitrogen in a bottle. So when we're not using those fertilizers and letting those possibly run off, then that's also preventing algae in our rivers and lakes. If you are on a lake shore or you're by a stormwater pond or anywhere you can get a shoreline planting in place, those native plants do a really great job of locking in the soil and preventing sediment from running off as well. Or with the wave action or the ice action in the winter, kind of banging into the side, that also drops sediment into your water, which we don't want. It's a great space to place your leaves at the end of the season because if too many leaves get into the water body as well, that's another source of phosphorus. So you can just kind of, mulch them up, toss them in there, and then they are great habitat for pollinators and everybody over the winter. And then more stormwater infiltration, as I mentioned. And since we're talking about gardening for healthy habitats, all of the fun creatures that come back when you put these native plants in place. So if you're interested in learning more about Root-Pike Wind, you can follow us on the different social medias, or we have our website, rootpikewind.org. We have a volunteer tab that you can click on, and there's a form that pops up, and it's basically, what are your interests and how would you like to support our organization and volunteer? And then I will be reaching out to you throughout the season based on your needs. But you could help with adopting a pollinator patch. So these are around at different schools and businesses and parks and churches. And native plants don't mean no maintenance, so they do still need some weed removal and some love. And throughout the season, especially at our schools, when the teachers aren't there, we want to support the teachers that are supporting these programs as well. So help them with get some weeds and help the kids before they come back in the fall. Or if you just want to plant some native plants, we have opportunities coming up this summer to do that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Christy. We look forward to you gaining many more volunteers after tonight's presentation. Next, we have Sister Janet and Linda are going to tell you a bit about the Racine food waste composting program and what's going on with all of that.
Thanks, Laura. Thanks everybody for being here and giving me this opportunity to talk about composting and why it's important to help create healthy habitats. I'm going to talk a little bit about the soil and why it's good to put compost into it. Next.
Sorry, it's lagging on me a bit, so I don't want to freak it out. Press the button twice. Oh no.
Well, I can go ahead and talk while it's thinking about moving here. By adding compost to the soil, compost is organic material. So by adding that to the soil, that organic matter improves the soil structure. It'll boost the soil aeration, and it also will help with water retention and also drainage. Oh, there we go. Compost is going to help enhance nutrient content by adding some good nutrients like nitrogen and potassium to the soil. And compost will also increase microbial activity, such as all those little creatures that are good to put in the soil, the earthworms and such. It's going to help develop a good ecosystem, suppress disease. If you have healthy plants, they're going to be resilient to the pests that you don't want. Some other benefits are promoting water retention. That organic material is going to help retain moisture in the soil. So it's going to help you with reducing how much watering you have to do. And that's especially important when we have all these dry spells and droughts that we've had in the past. Also helps reduce soil erosion. Healthy plant growth has those deep roots and it's going to hold the soil together to help with erosion from wind and water. Next. And what I think is the most important thing is the environmental sustainability. 20 to 40% of what we're putting into landfills is food waste, which could be composted and kept out of the landfills. Our landfills are filling up. You may recall that the Racine Kestrel Hawk landfill filled up a couple years ago. And so now Racine has to haul all their garbage away into a further away to be taken care of. And we could be using that food waste and composting it. I'm sure many of you do backyard composting, and I do that, but I also do participate in the Racine food waste compost program, which Sister Janet is going to tell you more about and how you can enroll in it.
All right, thank you, Linda. And let's have the next slide. We started the Racine program in 2024 after studying it a couple years and getting organized. And it was sponsored by the Racine Interfaith Coalition and our Racine Dominican Laudato Si action team as a way to help care for Earth herself. Next slide. And we began by looking at options. What were people doing and what could we do to help create more composting in the city? The village of Sturtevant back in 2018 started a program that worked quite well for that village. We also in Racine conducted a survey to find out how many people would be willing to join a drop-off composting program. What was their interest? Could we afford to do that? And we started doing education programs, letters to the editor, articles on social media. And then we connected with a group in Milwaukee or St. Francis called Compost Crusader. They're in the business of collecting food waste scraps from businesses and households and other establishments and taking it to another site to be made into compost. So once we knew how Compost Crusader worked and we could work with them, we tried to find suitable drop-off sites. It needed to be a place with a big enough parking spot that could house a composting bin, easy access for the trucks to pick up the food waste. And we began the recruiting process. People filled out a form and paid the annual fee. And then once we had 40 people registered, we were ready to launch the program. Next slide. That happened in April of 2024. About 40 people gathered on a very cold, windy April 20th date to initiate our first food waste composting bin. And a couple months later, we had more people in the middle part of town wanting to compost. And so we began the second site at Christ Church United Methodist. And it's located on Washington Avenue. Next, because we looked at the Sturtevant program, they are open to anyone who lives near Sturtevant to come and participate in their program. All people need to do is check in with the village clerk, register a brief little form with them, and then drop their food waste into that green bin anytime that's convenient. You know, as the note says, 24/7, you can get rid of your compost whenever you might be going past your drop-off site. Next. So the way it works, once you register online, we do it online now electronically with Compost Crusader, and the annual fee is $30 per household. Once you're enrolled, then you can start collecting your food waste at home and just put it in a compost caddy. It could be a vessel that's on the top of your counter or under the sink. We have ours with a cover on it, so it looks tidy all the time. And then collect any acceptable food from home. And as the Sturtevant program in Racine, you can drop it off anytime at one of the designated sites. Next. In order to find that registration form, just go to your Compost Crusader website and find the word services and look at the list and select drop off. Milwaukee has a drop off, but keep scrolling down until you find Racine drop off locations. Then just click on the link to sign up, complete the form, and submit it. Next, then you're ready to go. You've got your compost caddy either on your countertop or under the sink, and just make it a habit. I like what Christy said about, you know, if everyone did a little bit, we could all make a difference doing it collectively. So if it does take a little bit of effort until you get into the habit. We've been doing it for years at our house, and we never think, should I or shouldn't I? We never think of putting things down the garbage disposal, although that's a better alternative than throwing it in the trash bin. Um, so a little thought, a little effort, and then when your bucket fills, you can go past your drop-off site and empty the contents into the green bin. At our house, sometimes we fill our small container, maybe twice a week. But instead of dropping it off twice a week, we have a larger container in the garage that's covered, and we take the smaller bin and dump it into the larger bin, and then make one trip a week to the drop-off site. And again, at your convenience, 24/7. Next. And some, as Linda mentioned, she does backyard composting, but there are certain things you don't want to put in the backyard compost because you don't want to create an odor or attract rodents. So those things include meat, dairy products, bones, and fish. You don't want that in a backyard, but that can be included in this compost program that Racine runs with Compost Crusader. So almost anything can be put in there except raw, uncooked meat, fats, pet waste, or liquids. And we just need to really emphasize no plastics of any kind. No, there are plastic bags that say compostable, but because oftentimes people don't distinguish carefully between what is compostable and what is not, the company says no plastic of any kind, period. So just food scraps. Next. And from those green bins, Compost Crusader, based in St. Francis near Milwaukee, comes by either once a week or every 2 weeks, depending on how the bin fills. And they take that food scrap and they take it out to a place in Caledonia called Blue Ribbon Organics, where they have a large system and they mix it with many of their yard waste and they turn the food scraps into healthy organic material. It can be purchased at Blue Ribbon Organics in bulk, or they bag it and they sell it at some garden centers. Next. As we were researching this program, we found out that the city of Racine has 6 garbage trucks, and they run 5 days a week. Each of them makes 12 trips to the landfill, fill, 2 trips per truck. So that's 12 trips a week. And because each truck holds 14 tons, that's 60 loads of trash going into a landfill. And a minimum of 20% of that is food waste, which means that 12 loads of food waste per week are going into the landfill. And if you're quick at math, that's 336,000 pounds every week. And Racine has 31,000 households, and it works out statewide. Food waste average is about 300 pounds per person. And it doesn't just come from households. That 300 pounds includes food that's wasted at restaurants or at manufacturing places or where food is processed, also from farms, schools, institutions. And the Wisconsin DNR, they have a goal to reduce Wisconsin food waste by 50% by 2030. That's only 4 years from now. We have a long ways to go. And as Linda mentions, why we compost is to keep it out of the landfill. It saves on hauling fees. And for me, even a more important reason is it reduces methane gas, which adds to the greenhouse gas emissions and causes increased global warming. And the compost that you make from the food waste, it improves soil quality, and you don't need artificial fertilizers if you use compost. And it also, as both our previous speakers mentioned, it conserves water and certainly helps out our native gardens. And it is a very sustainable, environmentally friendly practice. It doesn't use up our Earth's resources. It contributes back to the Earth herself. Next. So far in Racine, we have had 88 households. Remember, 88 compared to 31,000? 88 households have registered. And in about 22 months, 11 and a half or nearly 12 tons now have been diverted from that landfill. And each week that Compost Crusader collects the food waste, they send us a report and the environmental equivalent of what saving our food waste, turning it into compost equals. And it would be as if we planted 151 trees or saved 1,033 gallons of gas from being burnt, which also contributes to global warming. And so what we're working on now is we'd like to get a third site, a drop-off place in Racine. If this was really to catch on, Compost Crusader would be willing to even do curbside service for households, but that would be more expensive than the $30 a year that households now pay. We hope to get schools involved, also food service establishments, and there's a great need to continue educating people about why we ought to be composting instead of putting it in the trash. Next. So anyone who's watching tonight's program could say, how can you help? You could help by joining this effort. Start a new habit, begin composting, either backyard composting or join the Compost Crusade program and do it at a common drop-off place. And spread the news to your family, friends, anyone you have a chance to. It's not that hard. And every little bit that anyone does to make our world a better place will help do that. So thank you.
Thank you, Linda and Sister Janet. That was great. And our last presentation of the night is going to be Going Wild, Repopulating Your Garden with Native Plants. This is going to be by Brandon Gross from Wild Ones, the Root River chapter.
Thanks for having me. Can you hear me all right? Okay, I hadn't had a chance to do my audio check. Thank you. So I'm here today, like Laura said, to share with you some of my favorite options for repopulating your garden with native plants. And then at the end, I'll be showing you how you can find some for your home or project. So I guess think of this as the plant perspective of this talk. I'm here from a group, as was mentioned, called Wild Ones. Here are just some of the cliff notes about Wild Ones and me. We're a national nonprofit devoted to connecting people and native plants. We have 91 chapters. There it is. Yep, 91 chapters over 34 states, of which I'm from the Root River area. That covers a lot of southeastern Wisconsin, south of Milwaukee County, essentially. A little bit of the tip of Milwaukee County. I'm the president. I'm also a master gardener. I do have a little education, but I'm also newer compared to some of our seasoned experts in this group. So think of me more as an advocate for native plants. I'd lean on others to be considered the experts. There's plenty more to know, and I'm happy to share resources with any of you to fill in the gaps if you're interested. Next slide. So for this crowd, I know it seems obvious what's meant by native, but when you dig into it, it can get a little messy and lead to some assumptions. Native ranges don't follow state or country borders, right? Plants don't care about our geopolitics. So to say something is native to the USA doesn't necessarily mean anything. It may also potentially be native to Canada, or a plant may be native to US and Mexico. Across the US, we also have plants or genotypes of plants that are specific to smaller regions within the United States. So the California poppy I have on here as an example. Across the US, or I'm sorry, you'll see it as a garden center as a North American native. It is not a Wisconsin native, though. And so if you go, great, Wisconsin, U.S. native, there we go. That's not going to be appropriate for our climate, our habitat, even though it will grow here. But bloodroot is a Wisconsin native. It's probably the closest we have in relationship. But even that species doesn't think, hey, I'm in Wisconsin. This is great. It thinks I'm in a cool, partial shaded woodland, right? And so you'll also find those in Minnesota, Canada, you name it. Just remember, plants don't care about our human boundaries. Next slide. Another technicality before I get into the actual plants is to keep in mind stuff like this. Oh, I'll have a few surprises, Christy, so I'll let you know when to progress, okay? So you can just go ahead and forward it then. That's okay. This is not a native plant, even though it is a coneflower, and you may have heard coneflowers are native plants. This is a cultivar. Cultivars and hybrids will always have these fancy names on them, like deep rose, because they've been bred to be more colorful or have blooms for longer. And that's a way that the horticulturist, kind of puts a proprietary label on that variety. I'm not saying anything's necessarily bad about these. It's just important to know what you're getting. True native plants have genotypes that match what's found in nature. Next slide. If you'd like to understand the broader impact of bringing these plants into your properties, I highly recommend this book by Doug Tallamy. He talks about the idea of each of us pitching in to create tiny little oases on our property that, on a large scale, give a nice, let's call it a web of connected refuges that insects, plants, animals can use to survive in urban environments. Next slide. Pollinators need you, and you need them. Whether or not you personally enjoy seeing these bugs around, can you click forward? Without them, we don't have an ecosystem at all. It's not just about preserving nature, it's about preserving ourselves. If we don't have these insects, we don't have agriculture. We don't have a planet that can support human life. So think of it that way. Let's help them out. Next slide. And let's get to the plants. I want to start with the monocots. I think they are very misunderstood. There are a few categories of plants in the group that usually gets called grasses. You may look at these out in the world and you go, oh, those are grasses. They're not all true grasses. And here's a little rhyme at the top to help you remember the three types. Sedges have edges, rushes are round, and grasses have nodes all the way to the ground. Click, please. This just means that sedges have triangular stems. So you can feel, if you roll them in your fingers, they have structure. Each blade of a rush, alternatively, is completely round. And true grasses, like you see on the right there, have little notches on them. And those are called nodes. That's where their leaves attach. And those go all the way to their base on the ground. So it's a cute little rhyme if you're ever interested in distinguishing the three. It does inform you a lot about how they like to live as well. So it's a good thing to know. These monocots are usually overlooked by people new into native plants because, well, they don't produce pretty flowers, right? Let's be honest. But they are essential keystone species for prairies, meadows, forest edgelands. Most native flowering plants, in fact, have co-evolved with them, and they depend on them for survival. A lot of these grasses are very rigid, and they help hold up the tall, lanky flowers, forbs. Insects are they're invaluable to insects. They use their stems for shelter, and birds eat their seed heads. And they're also beautiful in their own way. They produce these cool looking tufts in the winter when everything is dead. Just don't forget about them. Next slide. A really useful category of monocots that I wanted to share with you are the ones that can be planted basically anywhere. They're just not that picky. My property at home is all heavy clay soil, and it's very packed down because I live in a subdivision that was built in the 90s. So they just took crummy soil and piled it in these little mounds and plopped houses on top. And so I have a hard time getting things to take root deeply, but these have no problem. On the left there, Canada and Virginia wild rye. I love them. They both have these beautiful tufts on them at the top, almost like foxtails. But be warned, they are very tall, and they can take over a space over time. In the middle there is side oats grama. Has really cool seed stalks on it. They look like little trumpets, and they kind of dance in the wind. And then lastly, on the right, there are a lot of carex sedges that are workhorses. I mean, they will grow anywhere. And they're great accent pieces to a garden. They really do draw the eye because they're these nice, lush, dense pieces of foliage. I should probably have added big and little blue stem as well, because those are fantastic plants, especially big blue stem. Just seems to not mind the clay soil. All right, next slide. On to everyone's favorite, the flowering plants. They're my favorite too. The colors, the smells, the bees, the butterflies. I mean, it's a special kind of experience if you're in a meadow or a prairie that's just absolutely exploding with flowers. We call flowering stem plants forbs. How many do you think are native to Wisconsin? 1, 2, 3, click. Over 1,000. So you've got a lot to choose from. Pretty much every color, size, condition you have, or you're looking for, there's a native forb to fit it. Next slide. I'm going to start by sharing the tougher plants again with the forbs, since I only have a little bit of time. I figure with that time, it's most worth letting you know the options that will grow in any yard. Now, these forbs you see on the screen here, they tend to be bullies as well, because they're strong, fast growers. They're not overly picky with their soils. And so by bullies, I just mean they can take over a space very quickly. They can crowd out more slower growing plants. I would think twice before putting them in a tiny garden, unless you're on top of your pruning, or you only plant them with other bullies so they can kind of duke it out in that space. If you're looking for any other tough forbs outside of this group, look for any mention that they're like urban approved. There's that strip between the sidewalk and the road that's pretty rough growing conditions for any plant, very salty, very packed down. And so that's usually what they're thinking for urban approved. They can tolerate usually higher salt concentrations and heavy clay soils. So a good example of a really tough grower, probably the tough on this list, is the goldenrod there. You can find them in roadside ditches, to give you an idea of how ubiquitous they are, how easily they are to grow. It's kind of actually given them a bad reputation as a weed, but they're actually really important to the ecosystem, as are all of these that you see on the screen. We tend to call a lot of these plants clay busters, because over time their root structure will actually improve the soil quality. The roots loosen it up and add organic matter, and that allows less tolerant plants to move in behind them once these die, or it's called prairie succession, once these maybe move on over time. Great way to improve soil quality if you have large plots of land without an ounce of tilling. Next slide. A second category of forbs, and I don't want you to think these are mutually exclusive, it's just ways to think about your plants, right? Are what I call the givers. Some of the tough ones are also givers. It's, like I said, not mutually exclusive, but these are plants that have an extremely high ecological value, either because they provide food and habitat for a large number of species like bee balm and Joe pieweed. That one's fantastic. In my opinion, it's beautiful. Prairie clover, also incredibly ecologically beneficial. And it actually fixes nitrogen into the soil. It adds nitrogen rather than removes it, which is pretty cool. Any category of plant that flowers really early in the season, like spring ephemerals, or golden alexander, plants that flower really late, like some asters and black-eyed Susans, also extremely valuable because there aren't many food sources on the edge parts of the seasons, particularly as climate change is affecting the way that our springs and falls are. The temperature ranges of our springs and falls. Sometimes our insects are waking up too early or staying up too late, and if the flowers aren't there for them, they could starve. And so we need to make sure we're providing them things on those really edge cases of the season. You can check a plant's ID tag to get an idea of when it flowers over the year, and I encourage you to have a full spectrum of seasonality for your blooming cycles. Next slide. All right, we're going to get a little bushier here. If you're looking for bigger, longer lived plantings, now you're looking at shrubs. There are tons of shrubs to fit essentially any condition from wet to dry, shade to sun, and sizes too. Something really small like a New Jersey tea is only going to get a few feet tall. Meanwhile, a pagoda dogwood is essentially a tall tree. It can get to be 30 feet high. The reason that shrubs provide so much ecological benefit, and not only that they're visually a nice anchor, is that birds tend to come to them for nesting. The flowers support tons of insects, and then in the winter, often many of these bushes will hold on to their berries, and so they provide a food source throughout the winter for a number of different wildlife. And so, looking over these. The other cool thing I wanted to mention is shrubs also are very good at providing what we call winter interest, like the grasses. They give you something to look at in the winter. My favorite shrub in the upper right is the red osier dogwood, and that's because in the winter, if you could click please, it looks like that. And I think that is so cool, especially against the white snow. I have some in my yard right now. It just snowed. It looked really cool. I actually trim some of the branches during the holidays. I use them for indoor decorations because they're so vibrant. And so lots of different shrubs depending on the color and the ecosystem you'd like to support. These are some of my favorites. Next slide. And then finally, we shouldn't forget that native trees are native plants. This one, in my opinion, gets missed a lot when we talk about native plants. We're looking at flowers, we're looking at grasses, and if we're lucky, we're looking at shrubs. But I want to remind you all that if you have room for an oak tree, and I mean an oak tree, not a tree, an oak tree, please plant an oak tree. A single oak tree will provide more benefit to your local ecosystem than an entire property's worth of other plants. I say that confidently. It will continue to do that long after you're gone. It's a gift to the future. You'll also be doing your part to grab some atmospheric carbon and put it into woody material, which locks that carbon up for hundreds of years. There are 3 major types of oaks that we recommend. Now, that isn't all the oaks we have here. We got lots of oaks, but the red oak, white, and bur oak, which is the one seen in the photo here, that's my personal favorite, are great options. Those 3 can match almost any condition you have on your property. Like I said, there are others, of course. Each have their own preferred growing condition, but there really isn't a growing condition where an oak tree can't fit. There are obviously other great species of trees you can plant, but I have to be a pugilist for the oak trees, right? Because they take the cake in terms of ecosystem benefits, hands down. Next slide. So having shared some of those species with you, just want to leave you with a few design tips. This is a mission of ours at Wild Ones, is thinking about how to use these plants. I know we want a lot of flowers, but the grasses, as a reminder, will help prop up tall, lanky flowering species, and they'll look a lot better. They're meant to be planted with those. Depending on your space, you can also start thinking about giving a home to some shrubs. And with all of these plants, you're probably better getting multiples of all of the species and rather than planting just one of each. We do see that sometimes at our plant sales. People get one of 30 different things. And you're much better off getting bunches of 5 or 6. Repeating patterns are going to give your garden cohesion. You also want to keep in mind what will be blooming and where during each part of the season. Try to set it up so that something's always in bloom. From spring to fall, you always have something to look at. Native plants are not like your typical annuals at the hardware store where they stay in bloom their entire growing season. You may even want to consider winter interest. What do these dormant plants look like in the winter? What do I want to see out there? You can create really nice winter views with some of these. And then finally, remember accessibility. Native plants do have a reputation for being kind of messy and bushy. They don't have to be that way, but it all has to do with your design and the way you think about access. I like to put paths through my native plantings to make sure I can go through and prune everything and make everything look nice, because I unfortunately live in a subdivision with an HOA and I don't want any calls on me. So next slide. So I hope you found some useful tips today and an appreciation for native plants with some of the pretty photos. If you remember anything from today, please remember that no matter what your living situation, there is a way to add native plants to your living space. And in doing so, you're not just giving to nature. You're building a bridge with nature. It'll give as much back to you as you're giving to it. There's plenty more out there to learn. Like I mentioned, this was just a primer. Here's some resources there, wildones.org, of course. We'd love to have you as new members, so check us out. You can look at the Root River chapter for Wild Ones and sign up. And then next slide, last but not least, if you liked any of the plants you saw or heard about today, you can take them home. We're currently running a native plant sale. You just need to look up Root River plantsale.org. I have it on the screen there. You can browse the website for hundreds of different natives in every category, from grasses to flowers to shrubs and trees. The plants you order on our site will be collected for you, and then you can pick them up on May 16th from our farm, Dane Hill Farm. That's in Mount Pleasant, just north of I think Highway 20. It's just a few miles east of 94. So nice and easy. It'll be ready for you. You pick them up and you're good to go. All the profits from our sale go right back into our native plant grant programs and other nonprofit initiatives to spread the word, put more natives in the ground. And Joanne just typed in the chat, anyone attending this session can use the code HEALTHY5 and we'll give you $5 off an order on our website as a thank you for being here today. And so check the chat out for that. And truly, thank you. Thank you all for the time. It's been a pleasure to share this passion with you. That's it from me.
Awesome. Thank you, Brandon. Before we open up the floor to questions, I believe Christy has some raffle prizes to announce for tonight's participants.
Yes. So I waited because I'm using a random number generator based on the participant list. I didn't want to click around while people were talking because my computer was going to freeze. So our first winner is going to be Mary Mooney. Yay, Mary. And then our next winner, not me, is going to be Renee Witt. Did I butcher your name? I'm sorry.
That's close enough. Thanks. It's actually spelled wrong. My profile, I have to update that.
I just wanted to mention that the prize, the garden kit, can be picked up on the same day as the plant sale pickup on the 16th. We'll have your kit ready for you to pick up at the farm between 9 and 2 is our running time. So congrats to Mary and congrats to Renee.
All right. So if anyone has any questions, you're welcome to turn on your mic and just shout out what your question is to one of our presenters, or you can put it in the chat and Christy and I can read it out.
Hi, I can start. My name is Danny.
Hey, Danny.
I Brandon, I'm really glad you mentioned trees because that was something I was hoping to see here. We have maple that has to come down soon, and we have room in a different place in the yard for a tree, which is probably, I don't know, the space there without any garden is like 50 feet by 50 feet. Is that big enough for an oak? Or is there another good like native tree?
I think you're on mute, Brandon. We can't hear you.
Thank you, Laura.
Sorry about that. Yeah. So, right off the top of my head, I actually don't have like the
Dimensions.
what would you call
It's
it?
a very specific question.
Yeah, the footprint memorized. I think that we call that canopy spread, right?
Okay.
And so, obviously, if you're looking at 50 feet by 50 feet as what you want the canopy spread to be, then oaks are probably going to be pushing it. It'd probably be right at that limit. But now remember, oaks take 50 years to grow to their maximum size. And so I think that if you have a large space to plant an oak tree and a little bit of that canopy might be arching over some areas that aren't the actual garden space, that's potentially fine. One of the things I think I didn't get to mention in my presentation is a misconception is the space that's devoted to a tree is no longer useful for any other plantings. There are lots of companion plantings that work with trees as well. A lot of woodland forbs and things like that have adapted to living under the canopies of trees. And so if you're worried about it encroaching or shading other areas, that's an option. I actually just looked up my list here. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joanne. We do sell chinquapin oaks at the plant sale. And the canopy spread of that one is listed as exactly 50 feet, and it's a very slow growing oak tree. And so that wasn't one of the three that I listed, but that is a good one. Bur oaks are probably going to be your worst option because bur oaks, as you saw in that photo, very wide. That's why I love them so much. They have adapted to living on their own in the prairie, but they spread out, right? And that can have an 80-foot canopy spread, right? You don't want that. And so, sorry, I don't have a better answer for you. I would say the oaks are probably some of the largest trees. I mean, that's why they're so majestic. So any other native tree would be well within the space. There are a lot of other great trees. I mentioned at the beginning, I'm not an expert in that. I mean, we'd be happy to set you up with people that could maybe look at your ecosystem that you have on your property and place it. But yeah, oaks are pushing the limit at 50 feet. Yeah.
It's all grass right now, so it could use being something healthier, but that's the problem. With the tree we have is it was planted somewhere else, which was not enough space 50 years ago. And then I guess the other question would be if anybody has good suggestions of native plants that will help kill very bad invasive species, because we have a lot of that on our property as well.
Typically, and this is this is the one challenge with native plants. You do still need to manage that property for invasives. Now, a well-established native prairie or space that's been well tended to have native plants with deep roots, they're better at competing invasive plants, but a lot of invasive species are invasive for a reason. And typically when we're going to recommend someone reset land for planting natives, you have to go through and reset that land somehow, either through smothering. People who do large ecosystem restoration, I'm talking acres, they'll use glyphosate. I know there are mixed feelings on glyphosate, but it is what's used. It just, you got to get rid of the invasive roots. And so smothering for a smaller property is a good option. You can look up smothering techniques. Yeah. But
Yep,
I would
that's
definitely do that first and then plant the natives. And so those
okay.
aggressive bullies that I mentioned, anything
Mhm.
that's like really aggressive grower, those are going to be much better at outcompeting the invasive plants. Yeah.
That's really helpful. I wouldn't have thought, because the invasives are coming in a low lying, like very wet area. I think like what Laura started with. So that is not something I would have thought to plant there, which is really helpful. Thank you. Thank you all to all the presenters. This has been a lot of really great information.
Then I think we have two questions in the chat, Brandon, and I think they're both for you. Gloria is looking for suggestions for native bushes in mostly shaded areas. And someone else would like to know what a soft landing is.
A soft what?
Landing. I think it looks like Joanne said to look up soft landings, and someone said talk about soft landings.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Soft landings are the plants that you plant underneath the trees.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so I guess it's like to help the insects too, so that they don't.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if you have a way of explaining it.
No, actually, it's a great way to put it. I've heard soft landings before, but insects fall out of trees. And so do you want them to fall on the hard ground or leaf litter? If you walk through a lot of forested areas, it's not mulch, right? There are ferns and other pretty usually low-lying plants that like acidic, moist soils that have adapted to shaded areas, and they provide a soft landing for anything that falls out of the trees. Right? Think of it that way. As far as shrubs that are shade adapted, boy, this is fun. It's like you're challenging my gardening knowledge. I know there are great species of dogwoods that have adapted for under canopy growth. In fact, one of the challenges I have with my red osier dogwoods, which are my favorite, is I'm using them as a little bit of a border on my property. And they hate that because they get like 12 hours a day of sun. Ideally, shorter dogwoods are going to be more adapted to, let's say, 6 to 8. Elderberries, I think, are pretty hardy. They form a nice thicket, but they like damper soil. There's something called, I mentioned high bush cranberry at our meeting, and then Joanne mentioned that we don't sell that one, but high bush cranberry is an option. Witch hazel is a great one if it's a moist area. Witch hazel is really cool. Like, it looks really cool. It's got beautiful leaves, and it is a natural astringent. And so it's useful. It's got spindly yellow flowers, and it flowers really late. You remember I was talking about those late season bloomers? Really crucial late season bloomer for insects if we end up having a warm fall. Trying to think of anything else. Dogwoods, elderberries. There's something called a snowberry that works pretty well. And then maybe a honeysuckles. There's some honeysuckles I think that are pretty good with the shaded areas, and they're more drought tolerant too. So if it's a drier area, that one will work. And there's an invasive honeysuckle, so be careful. It's called the bush honeysuckle, Diurva ionicera. I can type it in the chat. I'll type it in the chat, but be careful with that one. That was me going completely off the top of my head. Sorry.
All right. Do we have any other? I need to check the chat. Do we have any other questions for any of our presenters tonight? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming this evening. Thank you to our presenters. All of these groups, Root-Pike the Sierra Club, Wild Ones, and the Racine Food Waste Composting Program, we encourage you to get involved with. Feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions or anything that you need help with coming up. And have a great night, everyone. Thanks for coming today on this
All right,
very
thank you.
snowy day.
Thank you.